Bien le bonjour a tous les monde. Muito bom dia a todos. Muy buenos días a todos. And a good day to you all. My name is Dr. Ian Ralby, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this event put on by Three Stones International and the NATO Hub for the South. Today, we are going to be discussing a critical issue in world affairs. In 2019, the headlines around the world declared that the Gulf of Guinea was the most dangerous maritime space on Earth. Since then, many who operate in the area would have to agree the situation has only become worse, more difficult, more dangerous, and seemingly more intractable. But today, we are going to be exploring how to approach this issue through enhancing the training, the education, and the exercising in the maritime domain of the region. We have an incredible group of people to speak today on how to do this and how to make security, governance, and development in the maritime domain of West and Central Africa a reality, and to combat all the threats, not just those most dramatic, that face the region today. Before we get into it, I'm delighted to welcome my colleague, Marianne Schreiner from Three Stones International, to get us started for the day. Marianne?
Thank you, Ian, and looking forward to today's session. Just a brief introduction from my side, because we want to spend most of our time on this important dialogue. My name is Marianne Schreiner, as Dr. Ian had mentioned, and I'm with Three Stones International based here in Kigali, Rwanda. Three Stones is a US registered research and management firm and focused in Africa. And we are supporting during this dialogue with the series with NATO South Direction Hub to assist in the dialogue should you require. We will have quite a large audience and looking forward to your engagement on the chat on the side, and you're welcome to do so, to put your comments and questions there, and we will direct those as much as possible to the appropriate panelists in order to answer your questions. And just so you know, your inputs as the audience member will also be included to inform the final report for publication. And just to keep the flow and to make sure that we give our esteemed panelists and NATO the appropriate time, we will ask that the audience remains on mute and keeps the video off during the dialogue. And if should any questions come up or we call on you, we will ask you to unmute at that time. And we welcome constructive criticism and honest engagement. We just really want to ensure that inappropriate and non-constructive comments are not brought forward in this discussion. And we will not be tolerating that and will result in any removal from the webinar. So thank you, that's all from me on the logistics side, and we look forward to the dialogue ahead. Thank you, Dr. Ian, back to you.
Thank you very much. It is now my great pleasure to introduce the NATO Strategic Direction South Hub. I am delighted to welcome the General to give us some opening remarks.
Good morning here, very good morning, really early, I guess, in a place where you live, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm Davide Re, Brigadier General from Italian Air Force and Director of the NATO Strategic Direction South Hub. Due to time, I won't introduce my team, but you will be engaging them, great experts from the Hub team. First of all, let me say that the NATO Strategic Direction South Hub was created in 2017. We started our first step. Our main aim is to better understand the regional dynamics, the regional dimension, mainly in the North Africa, Sub-Sahara, and the Middle East, through the engagement of selected partners. And we do that to identify with them potential emerging challenges, but mainly opportunities for cooperation. In the Gulf of Guinea, as you mentioned, unfortunately, is one of the most dangerous area. Was identified by EU as a 95% of the kidnapping for ransom in 2020. And of course, we know that EU is leading the role for coordinating the activities, to coordinate it as an international partner with the Gulf of Guinea and other international organizations, such as UN Office for Drug and Crime, Interpol, and of course, the Gulf of Guinea Commission through the Yando Code of Conduct. Our aim is just to have a better understanding of the region, on the dynamics, on the coordination, on the achievement that this architecture has reached so far, and also to understand how eventually NATO may provide support on education, training, again, to enhance, with the only aim to enhance possibly maritime security in the area. So this is my brief presentation. I thank also all the very authoritative panelists. As you see, the variety of expertise is really wide, from naval experience, of course, legal experience, commercial experience. Why? Because, of course, this is not only an operational understanding, but is a 360 multi-comprehensive understanding of those dynamics from fishery, from commercial, from, of course, also on the operational side, for which NATO may provide a role in coordinating and enabling some expertise that we have, such as Center of Excellencies or operational commands, in order, again, to project stability by assisting partners and the countries. It's a fascinating area of the world with 6,000 kilometers of coastline, 19 countries. And we are here just to learn from you the challenges and the endeavors to provide maritime security in this part of the globe. Thank you very much. I will give you back the floor, Jan.
General, thank you very much. And thank you to the Hub for the spirit of connection and communication and engagement that has permeated all of the activities the Hub has run since its outset. I am delighted to introduce really, as the Admiral says, or as the General says, a fantastic panel today. We have people who know this issue inside and out better than anyone else on Earth, and we have the opportunity to engage in a dialogue. So as my colleague said, please do take us on in terms of engaging through the chat, as we will try to incorporate all perspectives over the course of the coming hours. I myself have worked in maritime security throughout my career. I was a maritime lawyer by background, and I've had the honor and pleasure to work in more than 80 countries around the world. The pleasure, though, of working in the Gulf of Guinea is perhaps paramount, because the opportunity to engage with the professionals has enriched my life and my career in a way that is really hard to express. So this is personally quite an honor for me, and it's hopefully going to be as dynamic a conversation as is often the case with the Gulf of Guinea. But let me add a few comments to what the General just said about the Yaoundé Code of Conduct in order to contextualize who it is that we are talking with and the framework for maritime security that has been established in the region. Going back in history, it's worth noting that the first IMO resolution on piracy ever established in 1983 was actually on the Gulf of Guinea. So when talking about piracy in the Gulf of Guinea, it is not a new phenomenon. However, it has become more acute in recent years. In 2013, the states of the region came together and established a framework for cooperation. And the head of states across all of West and Central Africa established a mandate for the coastal and landlocked states to cooperate. In 2014, the African Union then proceeded to publish its Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050. And so if we look at this from an architectural standpoint rather than a sequential one, we have at the apex a Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050 that sets forth how the states around the entire continent are intending to secure, govern, and importantly, develop the blue economy of Africa. Beneath that, in West and Central Africa, the economic communities of ECOWAS of West Africa and ECAS of Central Africa came together along with the Gulf of Guinea Commission to establish the Yaoundé architecture, whereby 2 regional operational centers, CRESMAC in Central Africa, based in Pointe-Noire, Congo, and CRESMEO in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, would be coordinated through an interregional coordination center in Yaoundé, Cameroon. Within each of those 2 regions, Central Africa and West Africa, there are a series of zones. Zone A includes Angola, Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Republic of Congo. There is no Zone B, there is no Zone C. So skipping through the alphabet, we get to Zone D, wherein we have Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, and Sao Tome. And moving into ECOWAS, we have Zone E, which includes Nigeria, Togo, Benin, and the landlocked, or as they call themselves, land-linked state of Niger. Zone F, which is Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and again, a land-linked state of Burkina Faso. And Zone G, which is Guinea, Bissau, Gambia, Senegal, Cabo Verde, and the land-linked state of Mali. Now, each of these zones is intended to have an operational center, a multinational maritime coordination center. 3 are currently operational, 1 in Douala, Cameroon for Zone D, 1 in Cotonou, Benin for Zone E, and 1 in Accra, Ghana for Zone F. That is the architecture of security cooperation in the region. Now, the question is, how is it working and what is happening? And one of the problems that we have when talking about the Gulf of Guinea is that we go immediately to piracy, and we go to the spectacular situation that we now confront ourselves in, where pirates have become very, very frequent in their attacks and hostile towards seafarers. Years ago, the main focus was oil. Now the main focus is people. And that has changed the urgency and the seriousness of the situation. Furthermore, the geographic expanse has grown well beyond the Niger Delta, where it was originally focused, to include states as far afield as Côte d'Ivoire, Angola, Sao Tome, and beyond. And this increase in both the rate attacks, the severity of the attacks, and the frequency of the attacks has led to calls across a lot of different entities, from foreign navies to international organizations like the IMO to the shipping industry, for an urgent change in the status quo. So the question we're really looking at today is, how do we change that status quo through education, training, and exercising? And what can NATO usefully do to help that process along? So with us today are some fantastic professionals who can speak to these issues from an array of perspectives, from the diplomatic to the political, to the operational, to the legal, and beyond. And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce the first of our speakers today, Ambassador Khadija Mustafa. Now, before I give her the floor to speak, let me say that there are 4 critical questions that I hope she and all our speakers will be able to help answer over the coming hour. The first is, what are the real needs for education, training, and exercising to improve maritime security in the Gulf of Guinea? There is no point in providing education and training that is not needed. If it is already being done in some other form, we don't want to duplicate effort and to waste everyone's time. So what are the real needs? What is the current situation? In order to understand what those needs are, we need to understand the baseline. What is happening? What are the exercises? What are the training programs? What are the educational opportunities? Number 3, what is the status of coordination and cooperation to achieve that education, training, and exercising? One of the big problems that the region confronts is that everyone now has an interest in this area. And so as all the international organizations, international partners, private sector entities, foundations, educational bodies, all jump into the mix, how can we coordinate efforts so that we aren't taking up all of our time just in the very fact of duplicating the exact same attempt to engender true education, training, and exercising? And finally, how can NATO play a useful role in this process and support the maritime security, education, training, and exercising in the region? So those are the 4 key prompts. So now to Ambassador Mustafa. Ambassador Khadija Mustafa is a truly exceptional diplomat. She is currently the advisor to the African Union's, the chair of the African Union Commission. So while she hails from Nigeria, she sits in Addis, and I am delighted to offer the floor to her. Ambassador Mustafa, the floor is yours. Your thoughts on how to proceed.
thank you, Ian, for the kind introduction, and thank you to Three Stones International and the NATO HOPE for putting this dialogue together. This dialogue is very, very important. But before, as a way of introduction and for the relevant, I mean, I have done a few things I'm proud of, but the one that is related to this is the fact that I was in Yaoundé 2013 when the Gulf of Guinea summit met. The Gulf of Guinea heads of state met, and you talked about the architecture, the Yaoundé Code. I was also lucky to be there when the ICC was launched. But I must say, Ian, that my favorite of all of that is my visit to the 3 islands of the Bakassi Peninsula. So I like to talk about coastal and borderland communities. So I wanted to put that up front, because when we're talking about education, training, and exercises for insecurity in the maritime domain, like you said, we usually just concentrate on security, safety, and to a very great extent, military approaches. So I want to be upfront that I really am glad that we're having this dialogue, and I'm hoping that we are going to concentrate on non-military training. Now, in terms of introduction to my brief talk, and I'd like to start from what the Secretary General of NATO said about NATO relations with Africa. And I like to quote, and he said, "What happens in Africa matters for our security." And he describes Africa as a neighbor of NATO regions where NATO operates. Let me echo these sentiments by saying, or by stating the obvious, that we in the continent have long historical relations with member states of NATO. And a lot of our countries and our member states and our regional organizations also have bilateral relations and multilateral relations with NATO. So for us, this is a long-term relationship, but this is a relationship that we are happy to see improvement in. And the Gulf of Guinea, for Europe and for us, the Gulf of Guinea is very important, because, I mean, for him to say that we are neighbors, and the importance of Gulf of Guinea is for both us in the continent, and you mentioned AIMS, which is our strategy, and the vision of that strategy is really for wealth creation, the way that Africans can sustainably exploit the blue economy for the economic growth of our continent. So this is a good starting point for me, because I think that we need to change the narrative. We need to look at some of the ways we have been doing cooperation. And I'm glad that I have seen 1 or 2 people that have written about over-concentration on military or on security and no traction to the soft powers, if you like. And the soft powers for me then is to say that training, education should now concentrate on maritime development, maritime governance, maritime business. I know, and I'm saying this with clear assumption or clear knowledge, that NATO, of course, is a military alliance. I'm also saying this because I know that all of us have protocols and regulations, because I have negotiated quite a few agreements with our partners. And I know that there are certain regulations that limit you, your role or your interventions. But I am glad that the commander, when he was talking, he talked about 360 degrees of involvement. And what I really want to bring to the table is that our training, and I'm glad there are so many naval people who will talk about the military aspect of the training, but I now want to bring to the table, and for consideration of the hub, that the most important training, and that is why even we as African Union, with the AIMS 2050, we are now even writing some annexes. And these annexes are introducing economic development. I must admit, maybe it was not there in the first instance because of this over concentration on military aspect. Of course, insecurity is everybody's concern. But when we look at what the general calls the 360, or what we like to call the broader definition of security or human security, I think it is time that we now look at how, and NATO and its member states have quite a lot of technology to transfer, have quite a lot of investments, quite knowledge and capacity to build in maritime governance, science and technology, transfer of technology in areas of education, research and innovation, and in areas of, the industry, the maritime industry itself. And why am I saying all of that? Because the outcome really will be a win-win situation, because with job creation, for instance, and I like to talk about the community, when you have educated community, border coastal community, when you have professional personnel in the maritime industry, the investment that our partners will come and do will create job. And of course, it's simplistic to say that with job creation, you are likely to, it costs you less than the maritime presence, than interdictions, and so on and so forth. So what I really want to bring to the table, Ian, is that I think that education, and I think that the hub, and I think that NATO should look now, especially with all of us trying to recover after, in the post-COVID pandemic. I think that it's good that we look at how we can improve the economic. It makes economic sense. If the industry, everybody wins, I think. So in addition to doing all the hardcore military safety and security, I think that it is time that we concentrate on education for the non-military aspect. I think I want to stop. I have a few recommendations that have to do with cooperation, AU-NATO cooperation, and some of the things that we as AU, areas of communication and areas that we can build more. But I think that if I have an opportunity to come back, I'll talk about that. But before I finish, I have some colleagues. So I brought in some, I brought in some help. I'm not necessarily in the AU. I'm not necessarily the one who knows. I am probably the one who escalate. So I have with me colleagues. I have a colleague from the Peace and Security Department, Mr. Bam, whom I'm sure many of our NATO colleagues probably know. He is in charge of our peace support operation, which is a key area of agreement and key area of support that we get from NATO. I also have a colleague who is from the legal department of the AU. who is in charge of the agreements, its implementation, and so on and so forth. So during the discussions, if we need to go into deep assessment of the relationship, I hope that you'll be able to call on them to say a few things.
Thank you so much. And I think your remarks
you risk by asking me to speak first. So I hope I have not shut up.
It's a risk I'm always happy to take. I think you have really hit on something that is very important to remember, which is that the purpose of maritime security is always to secure the maritime domain for the enrichment and betterment of life on land. And recognizing the nexus between security, governance, and development, as you say, is critical to putting the political will behind actually resolving the maritime security challenges. So recognizing the importance of the maritime domain to life on land is crucial. And as I always am fond to say, and I think Phil Heil may be on with us, who is often one to repeat this as well: no shipping, no shopping. And I like to add no fish, no food, and no cables, no communication. And the maritime space is critical to life on land. So I think you've done very well to emphasize how much we need to not only stamp out the bad, but build up the good at the same time, so that the absence of bad actors is not the end of the story. The presence of good actors making economic progress towards a better life on land is part of the goal. So thank you very much. And we will definitely come back to you for the cooperation remarks as we move along. Now I'm delighted to introduce my good friend, Rear Admiral Boniface Conan. This is the first time I've been able to introduce him as an admiral, as he was recently promoted in the Ivorian Navy, and congratulations to him. I believe he's wearing his new rank today. He is not only an admiral in the Ivorian Navy, he is the acting director, and has been for several years, of CRESMEO, the West African Maritime Security Center. In that role, he is responsible for overseeing the development and coordination between zones E, F, and G. And he has done tremendous work to help fill out and really build and promote the security cooperation architecture under the Yaoundé Code. So Admiral Conan, the floor is yours. I believe you are still muted, Admiral.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay. I will first begin by greeting the officials because we are in the regional and serving the REX, the Regional Economic Community of ECOWAS. So I need to greet my higher boss for now, which is AU official on this panel. And I will greet the generals, admirals of the NATO SOUTH HUB and Three Stone International, and thank them for the opportunity for dialogues on the cornerstone matter of training and education to support maritime security in the Gulf of Guinea and the broad Atlantic Africa. I will greet all the participants, and hopefully what we are going to deliver now will help push further in the action we need to take for better security. I heard in the introduction that we are now ranking the most dangerous place, maritime place on Earth. Yes, that's where we are going to find good solutions also for security on maritime on Earth, and we are trying all the way to get there. Jan, you asked me to concentrate on the operational perspective and how we can make the region's strategic vision a reality through exercises. This is a very good question, and I was expecting, I'm not sure if we are going to have Captain Atachi on this board for now, since there was a little chief, but the documents are there. The YAMS have been working closely with the supporting organizations like UNODC, Interpol, and all of the goodwills working on the training metrics for the region.
Let me interrupt you.
All of these informations.
Admiral, let me interrupt you, if I can. Yeah. Can you just say what the YAMS are? Because I'm not sure everyone's familiar with the acronym.
Okay. The YAMS is something we can eat, but here it's the Yaoundé Architecture for Maritime Security. This is the acronym we use to depict what Yan Rabi have been talking about earlier. And he did a great job presenting the YAMS, so I was like, oh, everybody knows it, but thank you again for reminding me. And then this architecture, you have the ICC, in Yaoundé, and then you have the two regional centers, Cresmac and Cresmao, and I'm the leader of Cresmao for now. Actually, I'm the acting director, and I've been acting director for more than 4 years now. So, about the current exercises in the region, you know, Jan, sometimes we don't talk a lot about what is going on inside the countries. Let me bring you back to national exercises conducted continuously by countries. And I will point out one of them, testing yearly and every 2 years, the interagency platforms. We can talk about the Senegalese Samarex. Samarex is an exercise bringing on the ground and on water, all of the administrations and agencies working at sea in Senegal. This is a good example to reassure our boss from AU, Madam, that countries are working already on the 360 interagency effort to secure the maritime platform. So this is Samarex, and also you have bilateral exercises like Junction Rain conducted with the US Navy, which is not completely an exercise. It's called an operation, but it's conducted after some exercises, and it's proven to be a good exercise at sea with results on the ground, because actually navies go there at sea with the help of the US Navy, and they capture real criminals, especially the criminals against fisheries. So these are some kind of exercises that have been conducted in Cote d'Ivoire, in Ghana, and other countries around the Gulf of Guinea, and they are proven to be good. And then you have the large spectrum exercises, both geographically and thematically. I will name Grand African Nemo with the French Navy, and Obangame Express with the US Navy. Obangame Express will be at his, I think, the 10th session this year, and Grand African Nemo will be at the 4th exercise this year. They both demonstrate the eagerness of the professionals, person of a region. When I say professionals, is again to say that at the country's level, agencies like fisheries are interested in these exercises, and they take part actually in the exercises at the country level. There are right now the main rendezvous every year for the navies, and they will be more and more valuable as the state will acquire the more seagoing vessels, because you know that we are building up the country's capabilities and capacities, and while doing the exercise. And I think the exercises are a very good way to know the real needs of a country in the area of security, and the good lengths they have to go to build to conduct maritime security at on the broader scale. Let me take an example. After Obangame, was it the 18 or 19? They conducted mock trials after the Obangame exercises, they conducted mock trials in the jurisdictions in 5 different countries to make the link between the military or the security personnel and the judiciary personnel. So this is a very good example of showing the way our countries are thinking of interagency coordination and cooperation. But now we are looking for more collectiveness. I mean, we have been proving it to be good because the organizers will come and engage with each country as they go along. Now we are looking for more collectiveness when we'll have the zones working together at sea. And this will happen when the construction of the YAMS is completed and the centers are operational from national to regional level. The good thing about this exercise is that they establish a dialogue between the navies of the Atlantic Africa. And I say Atlantic Africa because during these exercises, it's not only the Gulf of Guinea, it's the Gulf of Guinea plus Mauritania and Morocco, and down to South Africa when they can bring in some assets. The way forward for this explication for these exercises will be the implication of the centers in the planning process. More, I mean, right now we are doing the planning together, but we need the centers to be going through proper partnership and ownership and taking more responsibility. And this year, the good news is that France will be conducting the preparatory meetings from Cresmao and from Cresmac. I think this is a good way we are going. The second point was about the concept of permanent exercise. Dr. Ian Ralby, what I think is that we need to go through training cheaper as a cost, but not training cheap. I don't know if I'm putting it well in English, but we don't need cheap training, but we need to train with the assets we have. And when we do so, we can do the training every day, every time around the year. And the big rendezvous with Obangame and Nemo will be the time we pull these exercises together. So we need to train the operators. And the Navy personnel, they know that they train every day on a ship. So we need to do the same around the Yaoundé architecture for maritime security. This is also cost effective because you use the assets you have every day for your work. You know that, I mean, you have been during the preparation of different exercises, you hear around this area, people talking about fuel, talking about how they are going to support the personnel, how they are going to send liaison officers abroad. This is a lot of money. But remember, since COVID-19 arose, we are trading cheap. We are just using internet. There is a cost to internet, but we are not flying from a place to another, and we are getting the results anyway. I'm not saying that we can do patrolling using internet, but we can train using these assets for the better. And the third question you asked was the ways NATO could help with operationalizing the Yaoundé architecture. Yet I'm not going to use our favorite acronym today because we have diplomats around. But the first thing I see here is generally when we talk with partners, we realize that they don't really understand the YAMS, how it is built, and the different missions of the centers. And I think that a first point to help a construction is to understand what is needed first. So we need to make sure that the centers are well understood in the way they are supposed to be operating before we help building them. To say something, generally, our partners will engage us asking if we could if we can go on operations with them as a center. And we'll tell them that it's not our role. Our role is to coordinate the assets the countries are going to pull together and go at sea together at sea for operations. So we don't own, the centers don't own the equipment, they don't own the assets, they coordinate. And for now, you heard about the MOUs between the different zone E and F, and we are getting there, and hopefully this year we'll be conducting the first patrols, I hope, before I leave my office. And the second thing is the way they can urge our regional states and organizations for action to be taken. And I'm happy that our representative from AU is here. We were talking about going all the way to AU to talk about that, because we need our big bosses like AU to help different countries understand that we need to move very fast if we don't want somebody else to come and do the job for us. The third point is about the allocation of contribution and support. When I talk with our partners, generally, I see that they are trying to find out where is the money going. They will tell us that they are putting a lot of money in the area, and we still have insecurity at sea. So that they are saying, does it work or is it not working? Where is the money going? And I will tell them, you need to make sure that you put the money to the right place. And then that you ask for accountability where you put the money. And if you are going to support an organization, please try to help and build this organization first. Because otherwise, until Cresmao is manned, fully manned and working as a regional organization, because for now it's only Ivorian staff conducting, working as an interimary team. Until you have this, it's very hard to support it because you don't have all of the countries, the member states of ECOWAS inside. And hopefully by end of this term, we should have people, and Captain Tuku will tell you, we should have people joining the center. We already have one official from Niger aboard. And a good news also is that Zone G has already a director from Senegal. And he took office already. So we have good news also. The last thing this is a thing we are doing. We have ship riders programs with our partners. I will expect to have something like staff exchanges program between the centers. We need to be able to send people around the island of Africa. We need to send people in the fusion center in Madagascar, for example, or to send lawyers to Seychelles, where first judiciary, suits were done against piracy. So these are some ideas on how we can best support our centers on training and education. Because we need, after all, to build a real culture of the maritime, and the way our diplomat in chief from AU said it, we need our people to think not only about sea as a threat, but also as a way to produce wealth and for the better of the populations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Admiral. And I think that that notion of creating a maritime culture is, it's hard to see from outside, but it is evident having been involved with the region for years. And even as the situation on the water gets worse, there is a growing momentum behind the professionals working together on land. And I think you have emphasized that very well. Turning now to another one of those professionals, I'm delighted to introduce my dear friend and close legal colleague, Captain Dr. Kamaldeen Ali. Kamal is not only one of the best maritime lawyers on the continent of Africa, but indeed in the world. He holds a PhD from the University of Wollongong in international maritime law. His 2015 book, published with Brill, Maritime Security Cooperation in the Gulf of Guinea, Prospects and Challenges, is one of the most definitive works on the state of cooperative mechanisms in the region. And his experience both as the former director of studies at the Ghana Armed Forces Higher Command Staff College, and now as the director of a West African NGO, CEMLAWS, the Center for Maritime Law and Security in Africa, is a fantastic background for engaging in this conversation. And indeed, he was advisor to ICC, to the Interregional Coordination Center, on training for a number of years, working alongside Derek Hitachi, who was mentioned just a little while ago. So Kamal, the floor is yours to talk to us a little bit about the importance of both legal education and training, and how to integrate that into both the wider maritime understanding of the region and the exercises that are conducted. So Kamal, floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne, for the kind introduction and the kind words, and delighted to be on this panel with colleagues and seniors. So what I intend to do is to quickly share my thoughts, more in the context of bullet points, and then to wait for the much more extensive interactive section. So I think the first key thing to consider is what are the key elements of a good training? What should be the key elements of a good training? And a couple of words comes into mind. One is that it has to be focused, but it has to also be broad. Focused in the sense that we have to identify the training needs, the areas, but it has to be broad because, as Her Excellency Ambassador told us, it has to be broad in such a way that it covers just not the hard security issues, but it covers other important dimensions across the maritime governance spectrum. So it has to be focused and it has to be broad. It has to be cost effective. And this may require us bringing training to the people and then making sure that we make good use of the numbers. Gulf of Guinea countries have organized themselves now within this structure that we are discussing. So within that structure, we can make training much more cost effective and make it more efficient. It has to be results oriented, which means we identify where we have existing gaps and make sure that our training is tailored. But 2 or 3 more requirements are equally important. One, it has to be enduring, and I couple that word also with being sustainable. When we have training that is enduring, which means that we'll have to retrain and retrain. The reality is that if you look at government architecture through to the enforcement and at the tactical level, people do change a lot, and it is just the case. It is just the case that if you went back to every Navy or every Marine Police 5 years down the lane, you realize that those that were involved in something are no longer in place. So we have to make it enduring, but we have to make it sustainable. And finally, we have to coordinate the training and make it graduated, and so that it can have long-lasting effect. If this is the case, which areas do we look at having training. And here training, but are also looking at it broadly beyond training. One, we need strategic engagements at the highest level. The truth is that there is high awareness of maritime issues across the continent, but it is also important that we engage strategically to define the training opportunities and the training needs. So when we engage at that level, then it is important. We need senior level awareness and, if you want, ambassador training. You know, senior level people who must deepen their awareness, but who will be ambassadors when it comes to training. We need it at the operational level, and Admiral Conham has covered that a lot, but we also need it at the tactical level where interdiction, boarding, and other things will take place. And more importantly, which is a greater part of what I am asked to talk on, we need it at the law enforcement level. At the law enforcement level, again, we need it at the, starting from the bottom, at the tactical level. It is at the tactical level that interdiction takes place. And whether we like it or not, interdiction must be conducted in accordance with international law, but it must also be conducted in accordance with national law. We can have as many issues of piracy as possible, but if, for example, Ghana Navy were to send a ship to sea and they conduct an interdiction against a flag vessels of Panama, for example, with countries, citizens of 5 other countries on board, if that interdiction is not conducted professionally and in accordance with international law, it will be a problem and it will be counterproductive. Then we need operational level training where legal instruments are reduced into operational language. When you come to the level of dealing with navies, marine police, they don't really quote articles based upon who they undertake training. They do that on the basis of SOPs. So you need to reduce the legal language when it comes to legal training into SOPs that come handy, that convey the message that is needed, and that becomes an effective tool for legal interdiction. And then you need evidence collection, you need evidence processing, which all forms part of the legal spectrum. And more importantly, you need to train prosecutors so they can have the capacity to ensure what we call legal finish, which is what we've all been discussing. And this is extremely important because at the end of the day, a piracy case will end in court. And if it ends in a court for prosecution, you must have the right people to undertake the interdiction for the prosecution. So what do we have currently as strengths when it comes to legal training? First is the YAMS, that we have the Yaoundé architecture, and within the Yaoundé architecture, it can be used and it should be used as a pivot for training. The second is that some work has been done in this area already extensively, including the training matrix that has been developed by the ICC with the UNODC, but also independent work that has also been undertaken, for example, by Goggin. It is important for us to pull all this together. And what we need as a basis for training already exists. We just need to make sure that we implement that and operationalize that. And that training cuts across, including legal training. There are international partnerships and experiences have already been built, from UNODC to Interpol to country level training, for example, by the US or by Denmark. Look, very important lessons have been built and people have been involved in this already. So these partnerships need to be leveraged, and that is part of the strength that we have. What are the challenges that we need to overcome? We need to overcome gaps in coordination training, legal training, but all other training. We need to synchronize them all and make sure that the training that we are delivering now will have the best and the highest effect. Funding is a challenge because most training is externally driven, and this is one of the biggest problem of Gulf of Guinea countries and African countries. We need to push more and make sure that our countries present something for training. We cannot continue to say that we want to secure our maritime domain and yet have zero budget or very little budget for training. So we need to dedicate some resources for training so that partners can then see effort and partners can also support that. But when it comes to partners, as Conan mentioned, it is important that when we come in to do training, we undertake the training with the people in mind. So the people will identify what they really need. And this is why I go back to a Yaoundé architecture and say that enough has been done and we need to build upon that. I know there may be some people who will be asking some key questions that training has been going on all this while. Is it still really relevant? I would say it is more than relevant. In the short time that I spent in the Navy, which is 20 years, I've seen where we were when it comes to training. The Navy was very efficient at tactical training and at being at sea, but I've seen other levels of training, especially law enforcement that has come in, that has uplifted the Navy from where it is and many other countries. But importantly, there's still a lot that we need to do. Take, for example, the Prosecution and Law Enforcement Office in Ghana, that is the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General. It is, except the few days of training that has been delivered by UNODC, for example, you do not have anybody who is specialized in maritime law at the Prosecution Division of Ghana, up to date. There are a few that have done maritime law, but that is at the civil side. But that shows you the importance of still scaling up this training, and not to suggest that training is no longer needed. It is more than ever needed. And only a couple of times I've had, for example, colleagues from Cote d'Ivoire, Charles, Captain Bell, contacting me. How do we get our Navy officers trained in such a way that they have the capacity, long-term capacity, not the 3 days training, they should have the long-term capacity. Again, this shows that training is indeed needed. And we need to spend more time gelling up what countries can do and their needs, using the ICC and the Yaoundé architecture as a pivot, and then enlisting partnerships and regional organizations and continental organizations in providing a training that will be enduring and that will be cost effective and sustainable. So this is where I'll put it. And I look forward to the session. And if there are questions directed at me or other colleagues that I can support, I'll more than be happy to answer that.
Kamal, you never disappoint. You certainly did not today. That was an incredibly clear and cogent explication of exactly what is needed. And I think you've spoken to incredibly important points, one of which that I think needs to be emphasized, which is that there is an architecture to work with. Let's work through that architecture to accomplish, not work at cross purposes. I'm now delighted to introduce Mr. Bud Dar. Bud is the Executive Vice President for Maritime Policy and Government Affairs at MSC Group. MSC is the second largest shipping line in the world and an incredibly important actor in maritime commerce in the Gulf of Guinea. As I said earlier, no shipping, no shopping, and Bud is able to speak to that quite directly. He, however, has a very diverse background that gives him a gravity in this conversation that is, I think, quite important, in that he has spent time in the U.S. Navy, the Merchant Marine, and the Coast Guard. And having seen the maritime space from the military side, the commercial side as a merchant mariner, and now as an official within the shipping industry, I think he brings a lot to bear on how to approach the situation. So Bud, it is my pleasure to introduce you, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ian, and it's really my pleasure to be here today, and my honor to speak among this esteemed group of other panelists. And I'd like to offer a few thoughts, partially based from my background, particularly in the U.S. Coast Guard. During that time, I was very actively involved in the piracy situation off the Horn of Africa, which has some similarities and some distinct differences, but I think those lessons are very valuable, but also from my current experience as well with the MSC Group, which does have a very large presence in the region, and that presence is driven by economic needs of the region. We're there to facilitate commerce. Our entire business is about helping trade move. And so I think it's important to understand that's why we're there in the first place, and it's kind of a given. But I'm not here today because of the economic arguments. I think everyone that participates in an event like this is sophisticated enough to know that the security situation can put the economic circumstances in the region very much in peril if not maintained properly. And I'll leave it at that. What really brings me here today is that piracy in particular, and that's what I'm going to focus on, although I have some experience in some of these other areas too, is a crime that is not to be talked about in the abstract. For the victims of piracy, and I'm not talking about the companies, I mean, we're collateral victims. The victims are innocent seafarers who are just doing their job every day, and their job is of great benefit to the region, or they wouldn't be there in the first place. And to be violently attacked, ripped from their ships, terrorized, at times severely injured in a physical and or psychological way, and in some cases, as we've seen as recently as last month, deaths result from that. This is a humanitarian crisis that we just can't stand by and let happen. And it's a hard truth, because I know people that participate in an event like this, they're really committed to doing the right things. I get that, and I empathize with it. But what we're doing now isn't working. These attacks are still occurring at an alarming frequency. The numbers that I believe say there were 130 kidnappings in the Gulf of Guinea in the year of 2020, and it looks like we're off to a banner year start for 2021. Unfortunately, my company has been directly involved, unfortunately, regrettably, with people we care deeply about. We're a family-owned company. We feel it very personally when people in our family are hurt. And that's exactly the way these incidents felt to us. And we want to do everything we can to try and do as the IMO Secretary General called for yesterday in his declaration of 2021 being the year of action for seafarers, to do that and to work collectively and collaboratively to take action, because rhetoric just isn't going to cut it. And ad hoc band-aids on the problem isn't going to cut it. We have to do something more effective. We have to do it together. And you have my assurance, and I can't speak for the whole maritime industry, but I know I can speak for the major container liner operators, because we are in very close alignment and trying to work together, that we're happy to cooperate, interact with you, whether it's this type of a forum or informally, so that you can understand how it is we operate, what we're actually experiencing on the water. But what I can tell you is what we are experiencing on the water is a situation that is deteriorating. It's not getting better. And these innocent seafarers are in harm's way. And we're trying everything we can possibly do to try and change that. And I'd like to talk about a couple of the comments that were made. And I think it's really important that when we think of piracy or armed robbery at sea, which is a close cousin to piracy, but usually for a technicality, the acts are legally treated differently, but they're pretty much the same piratical acts, if you will, are a symptom of what's happening ashore. And that has been true pretty much from the dawn of piracy, which goes back a very long time. And it was true in Somalia, it's true in the Strait of Malacca. It's the spillover of lack of rule of order ashore and criminal enterprises that are allowed to operate ashore without disruption onto just a target of opportunity, which, as I think everyone in this event knows, has evolved. I mean, we've all watched before our very eyes for it being more like simple robbery, violent as it may have been, robbery of things on board or theft of cargo, and it's now moved squarely into the model of sacrificing human liberty, in some case human life, for profit. Not for the benefit of people that are out at sea at the time conducting the acts. They're part of a much more deeply entrenched criminal enterprise ashore. And I'm not going to speak to specific countries one way or another in this discussion, but I will say you don't have to look very far to see where the hub of activity is here and where the focus needs to be on that shoreside component. And that's why I think Kamal's comments were particularly poignant. When I was working in this issue on the government side, with regard to Somali piracy and so immersed in it, I feel like Kamal and I could have been brothers, although maybe that's a little difficult. I felt that way when I heard him talk, because many of the things he was saying were exactly the types of things we were saying when I was involved in that, when we were developing the Djibouti Code of Conduct to cover East Africa and that region. And among those is, it's not just military capacity building and training. There also needs to be competent law enforcement capacity building and training. And depending on which seagoing force you're talking about, there may be blended authorities, they may be separate authorities, but you have to have the right people with the right authority and the right training to put all this together when you attack the symptom at sea of the actual event occurring. So I think it's really important we keep those competencies in mind. And there may be some of these competencies that pure military operators like NATO are best to deliver, but there may be others such as Coast Guards or customs authorities around the world, UNODC perhaps, that can provide the other piece of that of seagoing law enforcement. But all of that capacity building really matters. But at the end of the day, in my experience, you will not get a solution to this problem unless you have also provided capacity building ashore to actually disrupt these criminal enterprises, disrupt their money flows, particularly, which was kind of an unsung hero in the Somali piracy solution set, because it was mostly done behind the scenes, but it was extremely effective at disrupting the business model until it just didn't work anymore. It wasn't all just military interdiction, because that's almost a hopeless fool's errand, if you will, to think you're just going to solve it with military operations. It takes a combination of things. And I do think that naval presence can make a big difference, because sometimes even without interdiction, just the deterrent effect of having that capable of a force in the region can make a big difference. They also can facilitate communication between the regional actors and conduct training and capacity building in that regard. And I think that's a common theme I'm hearing already, and I believe in it very much, because if you can't have interoperability and cooperation between the response forces that are actually out there and day in, day out, even when the foreign operators may come and go, you won't be as effective and reach the full potential you could at deterrence. I'll also say just adding hardware into the equation is not really a solution at all. It does very little good, and I had a lot of experience with capacity building in my role with the Coast Guard when I was there. If it's not accompanied by really meaningful training and ongoing cooperation, you won't ever get it to reach its maximum potential. And more often than not, you find the assets ultimately in disrepair and not in the operational state of readiness that they would really need. I'll also say from a legal perspective, a couple of points that are important here. And that is, it's not just the rule of law on land that matters and disrupting the business model, holding people accountable for these violent crimes, prosecuting them, and making them pay whatever society thinks is a just punishment for it, but also at sea, respect for the rule of law is important. And I think we need to respect the boundaries of international law that include very different regimes for the territorial sea, where it's not piracy if it occurs in the territorial sea, and some of the most powerful tools available, such as universal jurisdiction and the right of visit of naval operators on piratical acts or suspected piracy activities, are somehow taken away if rights that are really not attributable beyond the territorial sea are asserted and allowed to be asserted. That's very counterproductive, in my opinion, and we've seen that play out in many other regions around the world in other contexts. And then just one other commentary I'll add here, and be happy to turn it over to others, and I look forward to a discussion, is the Horn of Africa had a very different setup when it came to governance. In that case was Somalia, which was exclusively the operating base of the pirates there. There was only the transitional federal government, which was from a nominal legal perspective, yes, the government, but from a practical sense, really had no capability to act like a sovereign government. And that allowed, certain liberties that otherwise are reserved for a sovereign state to be, taken up by and the gap filled by outside operators. That's not the case in the Gulf of Guinea region. We have real legitimate states with actual capability in all of these areas I talked about. They need help improving, but they wouldn't expect to be overrun by that, and they shouldn't. They should instead welcome those that are willing to provide assistance, both in the case of force generation for naval forces, but more importantly, the capacity building that goes with that, and this very important element of capacity building ashore to conduct the root cause law enforcement that needs to accompany that. And these things can complement each other when done in the right way, and if there is a respectful relationship for sovereignty, as well as an open acknowledgement of this is a serious humanitarian problem that needs to be solved. Real lives are being lost. Real lives are being dramatically changed forever by this violence, and we should not sit back and just let this happen. We need to do everything that we possibly can working together. In some cases, that may involve a role for private security as well to fill a breach until the situation can really be addressed. And I think that I would ask an open mind on that. If you put yourselves in the shoes of a responsible ship owner that wants to protect their seafarers day to day, which is all we're really trying to do in my company. We want to be good partners. We want to cooperate. We want to have mutual understandings and interactions with those of you in a position to help improve the situation. And it's really been my pleasure to be with you here today. So thank you once again.
Well, thank you so much. I think you do such a fantastic job of really underscoring the most important issue, which is that ultimately people's lives are at stake. And this is a human issue. This is a humanitarian issue. And any amount of discussion relating to architecture, capacity, capability, authority, jurisdiction, political will is all in some way support of saving human life. And that is a critical point. So thank you for underscoring that. And I think it also really highlights that the status quo is untenable. We can't leave it the way it is. And so we continue to look for how to effectively change that status quo using the work that has already been done to enhance the security and the security cooperation of the region. To that, I'm delighted to introduce Captain Emmanuel Belbel of the Cameroon Navy, who serves and has been serving for a number of years as the Director of Communication for the Interregional Coordination Center in Yaoundé. He has been very much a part of the regional discussions on how to not only advance security and training within the region, but also to coordinate the different international partners who come into the mix. So while we are starting to run short on time, we want to make sure we hear from the remainder of our speakers. So Captain Belbel, the floor is yours, and I look forward to your thoughts on how to actually coordinate.
Thank you, Jan, for this kind introductions. I would like to also thank NATO SOUTH HUB and Treestone International for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak before this audience. So I have been asked to talk about the challenge of coordinating the needs and interests of partners, including those of NATO, to ensure good training, education, and exercise in the Gulf of Guinea. I think before answering this question, allow me to recall the geographical and security context of the Gulf of Guinea. Many people before me have already talked about. I think the Gulf of Guinea, with a coastline of 6,000 kilometers and an EEZ of more than 3.5 million square kilometers with significant mineral and fishing resources are facing multiple attacks, despite the measures taken individually and collectively by the coastal state of the Gulf of Guinea. To this security crisis, we have to craft the grid of external countries whose interests and needs are multiple, multifaceted, diverse, and diversified. The Gulf of Guinea state and the structures they have created are therefore at the center of this conjunction of interests, sometimes contradictory and conflicting, that must necessarily be made. This task becomes increasingly difficult when it is often necessary to personalize the treatment of each interest or singular need, especially as the partners usually submit them at the same time. For the case that concerns us or the subjects of the question, which relate to training, education, and exercises, it should be noted that the partners have each developed their own strategy, which they are coming to carry out in the Gulf of Guinea with the help or not of existing structure. ICC, since its creation and its operationalization in 2017, being the umbrella body of the Architecture of Yaoundé, has been given the mission of harmonizing training, education, and practice at the interregional level and promoting cooperation with partners in the field of training, education, and practice of maritime professionals during operation and exercises at sea. Internally, that means within the architecture, it is therefore a question of finding a common training base in all the centers of excellence or not in the Gulf of Guinea in order to ensure the same treatment of incidents that occur at sea through standardized and harmonized operating procedures. This work is underway in the centers of excellence across the Gulf of Guinea. This work is done with the help of course, of our partners, who in other hand often come along with projects already tied up, and these projects sometimes does not meet the specific needs of the Yaoundé architecture. Even in this case, the Yaoundé architecture is incorporating them into its calendar. To avoid scheduling conflict and duplication of training topics whose consequences are the waste of human, finance, and time resources, the Yaoundé architecture has succeeded in arranging the partners' exercise. For example, we know that the execution phase of Obangabe Express takes place in March, and that of Grand Nemo in October or November each year, to only speak about the interregional exercises. It is the same before the COVID-19 for their planning phases. For other partners, in offering their support, they must take these events into account. I might talk about the Gogin project. I think that started in 2016. I think at the beginning, Gogin used to plan its event without taking into account the presence of other exercises. I think ICC did a lot to let them take into consideration other events. It is not easy on daily because now that Gogogin is at the end, almost at the end of its project, it is difficult to reconcile all these agendas. Presently, we are in Ghana to attend a training. At the same time, we are having this event, and I think in March also, along with the Obangabe execution phase, Gogogin will hold some training because it cannot do otherwise. The project ends in August. So another thing is that ICC, in partnership with Interpol, UNODC, and the US State Department, I think Dr. Kamal mentioned it during his speech, training matrix, which is being implemented with the help of the same partners. In a common project like this, the partners fulfill their missions as well as architecture. This way will allow us to know what is happening at sea by improving the maritime situational awareness. The training of trainers is currently taking place in Accra at the MMCC Zone F headquarters. This training is preparatory to the deployment by next month of some architecture trainers along with Gogin experts to centers of the Yaoundé architecture. I have to mention also that the Gogin project ends, as I said earlier, in August, and nothing is planned by EU for the sustainability of this important tool for the exchange of information at the inter-regional and international levels. We urge European Union to find a solution for the survival of Yaris beyond August 2021, like Krimario 2 in the Indian Ocean with Yoris software. It should be noted that we have succeeded with the exercise so far. We have not succeeded with the deployment of ships of the international navies in the Gulf of Guinea to conduct on-peer education sessions to the sailor of the coastal countries of the Gulf of Guinea. A few years ago, we witnessed stopovers of ships of foreign countries that overlapped when they did not follow themselves. The ships of our partners, once alongside the pier, used to offer the same exercises and the same training sessions on the same topics. The sailors were left with several approaches for the same mission. We used the French, the US, the Danish, the Spanish method, etc. in the first, let's say, of maritime interdiction, maritime operation, VBSS, and so on and so forth. ICC in 2018 asked a country that is at the same time a member of the EU and NATO to coordinate the presence of international navies and their efforts in terms of training and practice, which this country has not succeeded to do so far, certainly despite its good will. In conclusion, the EU is present in the Gulf of Guinea, the US is present, NATO is shaping up, the countries of both the EU and NATO are already here individually, each with its own project, its own expectation amid the interests and needs of the Gulf of Guinea. If the ultimate goal is to make the Gulf of Guinea safe and secure, the partners must take into account and work closely with the Yaoundé architecture structures and the coastal country. Thank you for your attention. I am keen to answer the questions within the limit of my knowledge.
Thank you so much, Captain Belbel. And I think you've made some incredibly important points and touched on some of what was being asked in the chat relating to the YARAS platform and how that is unfolding. In the interest of time, I'm going to turn now to Captain Tukur Mohammed, and I hope that he is able to join us. Captain Mohammed is with the Nigerian Navy, but he is currently operating out of Abuja, where he serves under ECOWAS. He is part of the regional security division of ECOWAS, headed up by Dr. Dieng of Senegal, but he brings a wealth of maritime expertise to the role and helps to oversee some of the structures and approaches we've been discussing. So I'm looking forward to hearing his take on politically as well as operationally how NATO can help build the impetus for engaging in greater training, education, and exercising in the region, not just for piracy, but across the spectrum of maritime security considerations, including trafficking of drugs, arms, humans, and of course, IUU fishing, which is one of the key concerns of the region as well. So, Captain Tukur Mohammed, I hope you were with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ian, for the kind introduction. It is my pleasure to be here, and also like to use this opportunity to express my profound appreciation and gratitude to the organizers. I would like to, much has been said from Admiral Conan Benin and Dr. Kamaluddin, so I will look at the support from the ECOWAS strategic pillars. What the first pillar is strengthening maritime governance. So looking at it from policy and legal, even though over a period, ECOWAS has been engaged with some partners, in particular UNODC, that has provided a support in terms of training of lawyers. But however, Dr. Kamaluddin has highlighted we have a challenge in terms of maritime law specialists within the region. I think it's something NATO could look at. Maritime security and safety from the operations, exercise, and training. And Director Crisma has highlighted the rationalization of training needs. It's a welcome development to come through the political instrument ECOWAS Commission to see what is existing on the ground and what other partners have. The point of entry is through the regional economic communities and the regional mechanisms, in this case, the African Union and the ECOWAS and the partners. The third is maritime environment, after maritime security and safety, as the second pillar of the ECOWAS integrated maritime strategy, looking at the environmental pollution and challenges in the providing regulatory frameworks. And this is also another area given the oil spills. And also when you look at issues when you relate to illegal ownership.
Captain Mohammed, I think we have lost you.
Yes, well, we've lost him. We will try to regain. Okay, great. Well, while we try on that, I'm going to go ahead and in the interest of time, invite Dr. Ife Okafor-Yarwood to help wrap us up in this discussion before engaging in more of a Q&A session. Ife is
one of the world's leading experts from both an academic but also a practical sense in understanding the diversity of issues that go into maritime insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea. And I don't think there's anyone better placed to sum up this panel by virtue of her position now as a professor at the University of St. Andrews. So truly an educator and also familiar with the day-to-day training, education, and exercising needs of the region. Ife, if you would, please give us your thoughts. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'm so excited to be here. Without taking so much of your time, I was asked to focus my discussion around the role of educational institutions, both in education and training, and wider analysis around the situation in the region. And I want to start by saying that absolutely academic institutions. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So thank you so much for having me. I was asked to focus my discussion around the role of education institutions, both in education and training in the region. And I want to start by saying that absolutely the educational institutions have a central role to play both in training and education, because according to Article 14 of the Yaoundé Agreement, actually Article 14F is that fostering cooperation among maritime training institutions and research centers. And interestingly, we can say from this whole conversation we're having, I know that there might not be time to go into context, but to a point, training is happening. But the research component is actually not happening. And that is something that is very worrying, given that how can you actually understand the state or sort of give a holistic picture of the problem in the region if you're not able to engage in research and then understand what the needs are, both training and education needs. Another thing is obviously we talk so much about interregional cooperation and collaboration, and almost everyone that spoke here have actually talked about it. I actually listened with interest to the conversation or the presentation that was made by Board, and I think that he made really very fascinating point, which is actually very accurate. But at the same time, I'd like to say that in the context of really looking at this from a holistic point of view, and we're talking about maritime security, unless we are changing the general understanding of maritime insecurity to just being all about piracy, and even when we want to do that, and we want to talk about it from the perspective of both economic and personal security and other security issues, I want to say a few things. For example, in comparison, according to a report, between 2015 and 2017, West African countries lost an estimated 717 million to piracy. Obviously, it pales into insignificance if we're using the economic justification to sort of explain why piracy should be something that we should bring to the fore. Then in comparison, 6 countries in West Africa lose 2.3 billion each year to illegal fishing. I mean, that is a lot of money, especially when we take into account that obviously we have the Yaoundé architecture, and we know that government and partners are doing so much to make things happen. But financing or finance, as Kamal mentioned, is a problem. So it therefore means that it's practically impossible for us to continue to look at this maritime security situation, even the training needs. Again, I don't want to detract, or focusing on training, it's important that it should therefore be all about, it should be more integrated. Perhaps there's a role for communities to play here. So for instance, even if we decided that, okay, it's going to be about military response and militarization of the oceans, which by the way, sometimes affects fishers, because you end up seeing that unfortunately sometimes that they are the victims or they are victimized because they are probably somewhere that they shouldn't be. But if we extend this education and training to communities through sensitization program so that they understand why things are the way they are, why they are not necessarily expected to go to certain areas, no matter your excuse, that going beyond this particular point could mean that you are endangering your life because you could be presented or seen as a pirate or a criminal. At the same time, education and training, because at the end of the day, we understand that these criminals or these pirates bring their bounty on land or ashore. We need to sensitize and train local coastal communities and actually make them part of this surveillance, obviously within reason or where reasonably practicable. Because at the end of the day, who is going to tell you where the pirates are housing people? It is going to be the local person, the woman, the man that is living around the vicinity that actually feel, well, there is an incentive, not necessarily a monetary incentive, but there is an incentive for me to help stem the tide of this problem. And the only way they can understand that incentive is that if they are educated or supported or trained or sensitized to understand that actually addressing this problem should be a collective thing. Another point that I want to make, and then hopefully I hope we have enough time, and this is in the spirit of continuing with the amazing presentation that was made by everyone else, but especially by Ambassador Halima when she talked about the human national, or looking at this from the human perspective. I feel that, I mean, almost all the problems of maritime security issues is very important for us to address. But I think that actually trying to address this without really ensuring that that interagency or stakeholders collaboration and cooperation is happening, it's very wrong. And the only way this can happen is for training to take place, for interagency or agencies to train together to understand what A is doing better than B. And interestingly, this is already happening in silos. So I can give an example of the Fisheries Committee for West Central Gulf of Guinea. They have this West African task force on maritime, on monitoring, surveillance, and control. And within it, they have national working groups. And within the national working groups, they have different agencies, the navies, the Coast Guard, the port authorities, the drug law enforcement agencies coming together, working collectively. And interestingly, there are actually evidence of really good results, fisheries crime being tried, evidence collected together, you know, for agencies that do not have the capacity to interdict, working with the Navy to sort of identify some of the strategies of this fisheries crime outside piracy, really working collectively. But the fact that we do not, I guess, even though that the agreement have mandated for this, this is not really happening at the regional level, means that the D component of Article 14, which says exchange of views on maritime issues, is not necessarily happening collectively, because people can then be able to share best practices. You know, this is what we've done differently. This is what is happening differently. And if we have a focal point where they can collect this information and speaking in one voice, we can avoid replication or duplication. We can avoid waste of time, waste of resources, and actually make sure that the training needs that is given is basically what is needed. I want to conclude by reiterating something. So when I was invited for this, I decided to do my own small research, talk to different agencies in the region to see, so how is this collaboration working? What do you think about ABC? And I'm going to read an excerpt without obviously saying who told me this, when I talked about what do you think about research and actually this whole idea of maritime security in the region. And the person said, and I want to quote, he said, research is always neglected, no matter the rhetorics, because security services, for example, would say, we know what the problems are, give us the money and the resources, right? And then for the policymakers, they often rather there is less knowledge of a problem because that might also expose their complicity, their ineffectiveness. And in a nutshell, coming back to the point that Captain Belville made about fund, and I hope that was you, about fund and ensuring that the funding is going to the right place. You can spend, I'm talking to the partners now, you can spend 2 billion every year without research to actually understand what the problem is. You are literally wasting your money. And this is not even about appropriation of your money or your fund, but because you're bringing money when you've not actually understood the situation, you're basically investing it in the wrong place. So in a nutshell, the training should actually involve the communities. These are already happening in places like Ghana, where actually community members are now contributing data, especially in relation to illegal fishing. But if we have a focal point, they would have a place to actually come and share their knowledge, and this can be replicated in other regions. And hopefully in the long run, this would bring about reduce or stemming the tide of piracy on our Red Sea, as so many people in the shipping industry are so eager to see happen. Thank you so much.
Eva, thank you so much. And that point about research, I think is absolutely fantastic. And if you think about, excuse me, taking a strategic approach to education, training, and exercising, strategy starts with knowing yourself, knowing your threats, and knowing the terrain in a very meaningful way. And that research underscores how you go about achieving not just the information, but the understanding that can then shape a needs-based program that, to echo what so many speakers have said, is effective, efficient, and sustainable. So I think you've made some really tremendous points there. I believe Captain Tukar Mohammed is back on, and we are going to bring him into the conversation. Yes, you're here?
Can you hear?
Yes.
Yes.
Would you like to conclude your remarks?
Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Ian. I'm sorry for had network issues. So I was going to the fourth pillar, optimization of the maritime economy, which borders on the activity regulation and management of commercial ports, transport market conditions. And over a period, we had issues in terms of reporting cases of piracy by the International Maritime Bureau. Even an attempted attack is also looked as a piracy case. From my perspective is to use it in order to increase insurance premium. So we should be very open and through real data from the maritime centers that could further provide the positive perspectives. Not at times when the data comes outside of the continent or the sub-regions, we need to verify the data. So in this regards, NATO will be a critical partner through the entry point of REX and regional mechanisms in order to provide support. But there should also be clarity, looking at what is on ground, where other training needs are provided through the EU 11th EDF. We have the Regional Maritime University and also the ISMI in Abidjan. So, but they are welcome, and also Yaris training is provided, which has been highlighted earlier. So looking at, in conclusion, the areas of support, conduct of maritime exercises among and between member states of ECOWAS and ICAS, implementation of joint maritime operations among member states of MCCCs, in particular in zone EF and G, and other activities through a comprehensive maritime security sector reform that will provide education and training needs assessment in the Gulf of Guinea at large. We should also leverage on a legal text on harmonized standard operating procedures on arrest, detention, and prosecution of arrested persons and vessels in conducting joint maritime operations. So as a way forward, in the short period is to engage with ECOWAS through a political dialogue as an entry point within the ECOWAS sub-region and within the continental framework through the African Union in order to support ECOWAS member state maritime security sector reform program, and also support member states in adopting and implementing national maritime strategies, and also support ECOWAS maritime centers in harmonizing standard operating procedures and rules of engagement, and also technology transfer, looking at the satellite imageries, and in conclusion, to take appropriate measures on a follow-up action plan and sustainability strategy. Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you so much, Tukar. And it is, I think, really helpful to hear the points you made about data collection and understanding being headquartered in the region. And that is a recurring theme in a lot of our discussions about where is the data coming from. And I know Captain Belbel and others have spoken to the point of being frustrated about learning about an incident from somebody in Malaysia after it's already occurred, you know, just a few miles off of where you're sitting. And that is, I think, a difficulty that needs to be addressed. Before we get into that, though, it is now time to start turning towards Q&A. And for that, I want to invite NATO to pose the initial set of questions. We're going to have an opportunity for a robust discussion, but also some recommendations. And NATO, I think, will kick us off with some of the key questions that they would like to hear answered. So to the hub, over to you.
Thank you very much on behalf of the director. And we will not pose so many questions because we need the ground for the audience to pose their questions to the panelists. Thank you very much for this very informative session that's really raised the awareness that we perceived and the network that we also perceived to get people connected. And we had a very good example when Admiral Sir Boniface talked with Madam Ambassador about the needs between ECOWAS and African Union. So quick question about standardization and interoperability. I would like to hear from ICC, taking advantage of the opportunities provided by the COVID, how they foresee that we can train cheaper, getting e-learning and e-training facilities using, of course, cyber resilience in your domain.
Do you want to pose a couple of questions and then we can answer them all at once, or do you want to go one by one?
No, we would like to have people also from the audience posing questions, because if we take all the ground, the people in the ground do not have their time.
Well, we have quite a lot of questions. So why don't we start off with that one, because I think that is a really key one on looking at standards and interoperability. And there were a couple of comments made about standard operating procedures and harmonization of standard operating procedures. So over to the panelists, it's open for who would like to speak first. And if no one speaks up, I will call on someone. Admiral Conan, would you be willing to speak to that, since you raised some of those issues right off the bat?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Yanralmi. We in the ECOWAS area, in the ECOWAS region, we decided to approach these questions by zones. You know, actually, you don't get to understand this until you are working together. And we are doing something with the countries, and also one of the missions of ICC and the regional centers was to try and get the countries to talk to one person when we are talking about equipment and procedures. And in doing so, if you remember, there was a good job of SOPs, about SOPs done with the US Navy around this area of the Gulf of Guinea in ECOWAS, in the ECOWAS region. You remember one of my favorite challenges I raise when we have this kind of discussion is about language. We are talking about interoperability, but language is about human interoperability. Because for now, generally, the operators, the people who are working with the systems, generally, they get the same stuff from the same market. But the human interoperability is the key. When we get to that, I'm from a French-speaking country, but
Boniface, you've been muted somehow, so if you could unmute yourself.
Somebody doesn't want me to speak. Okay, what I'm saying is that the language problem, the language barrier is a key to, we have to try to erase this barrier to get interoperability of human beings. Because generally the navies and the different administration tend to go to the same companies to get the equipment and to get to, and now we are working on same SOPs by zones, and then this is being worked on. And as I put it, in my early ages until now, what we learned is that there is one maritime language. I'm not going to say it, but myself, I'm from a French-speaking country, and what we say in Cresmao here is everybody should learn, including the English-speaking countries, should learn at least a second language. Because interoperability for me, it's interoperability of human. Because after that, using the SOPs, using the way we get the equipment, and ICC was trying to get even a way of buying equipment together for an economic reason, to make sure that we address our needs to the same company so that there is something to gain about the cost. So I think this is a very good question we need to focus on the coming days.
Thank you very much. And I want to turn the question over to Kamal, because I think there's a really important legal issue with this as well. Admiral Conan has brought up the challenge of language, but language also comes with some history that involves different legal systems, not just language of law. So between common law and civil law countries, there are different approaches to collecting evidence, to handing it over, to actually developing the dossier or prosecuting the case. And I think that difference needs to be part of the thinking on how to ensure interoperability and standards across the region for these law enforcement functions that we were discussing. So Kamal, do you want to speak to that at all? Because you know, there is a danger of oversimplifying some of the legal education if the distinctions between those systems aren't kept in mind.
Yes, a quick one. Thank you, Ain. There are certainly fundamental differences, and perhaps when it comes to criminal jurisprudence and fighting crime, common law system is so complicated and at times self-defeating. Be it and can be frustrating also to operators, you know, who go to sea or a common law system, because it's like you almost do all your best, but what you see staring on your face on a daily basis in the common law system are legal gaps that operators are never able to have in mind when collecting evidence. Be it as it may, I think that the chain of custody in most common law countries is even much longer because ultimately the people who collect evidence may never be people who will be at sea to testify to the credibility of that evidence. So it makes the issue even much more difficult for to secure prosecution. But what I do know is that it's something that we can solve easily. For whether you are dealing with common law or civil law, we have to reduce the processes for collecting evidence in the SOPs that work within the particular legal system. And I think this is part of the work that that is important to do. You have for example, the harmonized HSOP in Nigeria and other countries are developing this. Would first of all bring in the operators together. But at the level of the police, the level of the Navy, there must be SOPs that tell them what to do and how to hand it over to somebody within the legal system. So definitely what we will draft and put together as SOP for securing and making evidence tight within Nigeria and Ghana will certainly be different from what we'll do for Cote d'Ivoire or the Republic of Togo. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I think there's a really important discussion here on both the horizontal and vertical establishment of standards, operating procedures, and interoperability, both of equipment, but also human capital, and that involves the language issue and the legal issue. There's also a question, though, about creating standard operating procedures between the navies and coast guards of the region and the industry itself. And so, Bud, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how to achieve a more functional and interoperable approach for the shipping industry to engage with navies so that response times are reduced, so that clarity is highlighted, and that ultimately the seafarers who are in danger are the main focus and are looked after as quickly as possible.
I think that the number one piece of advice I'd give on that is settle on an architecture and a single focal point, because I've been involved in several discussions where the reporting lines would be different depending on where you are in the region. And I think that is really just too much to ask in the face of an emergency to make sure you place the right call to the right place at the right time. So I think I certainly appreciate why some would not think ICC is best suited to do that, and frankly I think they're better at collecting information than they are at communicating with the operators. That's not really their core function, as I understand why it was set up. Maybe as an interim measure, maybe MDAT Gulf of Guinea could be of some assistance if it's not to be the actual focal point. But that might be a good starting point. And then as confidence and trust is built, not only between the industry and the regional authorities, but also between the regional authorities themselves, maybe we could harmonize that so that there is just one clear central point of contact. We're in the heat of battle, I mean, literally battle. We're dealing with very sophisticated, very professional, violent criminals in some of these situations. You don't make a mistake. You know exactly who you're supposed to call. You make one call, and that information gets delivered to where it's supposed to be delivered. And so I think the trick is putting aside conventional notions of how the architecture is subdivided right now, and come together with one common architecture when it comes to actual reporting. You get a much better response from the industry and probably much more consistent and helpful. There also, I'll point out, I believe there's a substantial amount of underreporting of these incidents, and we've seen it in other regions too, where honestly, if a report doesn't lead to a reaction, the operators tend just to kind of stop reporting. So I think it's really important that we work together to build that trust in each other. We had an incident where a naval operator was in close proximity of a ship that was under attack, and they said, we understand your situation, we won't be assisting, we've notified the authorities ashore. Kind of shocking for our crew. Didn't really provide a lot of confidence that they'd called for help from the right people, when frankly I would think they did call for help from who I would think were the right people in the region. So we need to work through all that, and I think part of that is events like this and other types of engagement where we can meet face to face and just build trust in each other.
I think that point is crucial. If you know the person that you're supposed to call, it's a lot easier to pick up the phone and call them, and they're more likely to actually respond. And so this going to Admiral Conan's point on the now more prolific use of technology to have engagements, I think the opportunity is there to create momentum behind building those relationships. And there's been a question that's posed to you, Bud, so I want to turn it right back to you. Who is the point of contact for you when you go? Is there any clear protocol, or is that always shifting? How are you dealing with that sort of confusion?
So at present in the region, we've instructed our ships to report to MDAC Gulf of Guinea should they encounter an incident. Our expectation is that they will immediately liaison with the correct operators in the region. With that being said, I think those of us on the industry side think that we need to work a bit closer with MDAC Gulf of Guinea to make sure they're capable of actually delivering on that. And again, they're located outside the region, but if we were to pick one central place to call, those are the instructions we've given at this point.
That's very helpful. And I think, just in terms of formulating recommendations, one of the things that NATO may be able to help do, given its experience with coordinating response between a wide number of different countries, different languages, is to help come up with ways to facilitate clearer standard operating procedures for closing that gap between the industry and the navies and reporting centers and architecture of the region, as well as some of these extra regional bodies like MDAC-GOG and IMB and others. So I think that's a really useful point to make. There have been a lot of questions on IUU fishing, and I want to turn to that because I think it is an incredibly important piece. And this actually is not unrelated to piracy as well. If we look at the attacks, even just recently off of Gabon, but across the region in Cote d'Ivoire, in Ghana, in Benin, in Togo, the last year has seen a rather precipitous rise in attacks on fishing vessels. And so piracy and fishing and potentially even IUU fishing are starting to intersect. But to move us beyond just talking about piracy, I want to pose a couple of questions about IUU fishing. And the first one is really, how can this same architecture and what we were even just talking about relating to setting up clearer standard operating procedures between industry and the region start to be used to help focus on other issues, but particularly on IUU fishing, which is a threat to the regional communities, the coastal communities, and the regional economies, which, as Bud had said before, is where a lot of the piracy issues originate. If we take that piracy as a land-based problem with maritime symptoms, the economic activity of those who live on land is critical, and IUU fishing undermines that as well. So how can we focus a little bit of our attention on leveraging the work that is being done for counter-piracy to also deal with counter-IUU fishing and maybe close the gap between those two offenses? Ife, do you want to kick us off on that one? Because I know that you spoke a little bit to that already, and I know this is one of your areas of passion and expertise.
Thank you so much for the question. I think in the spirit of sort of borrowing some of the themes of the things that have already been said, that the only way we can do that is obviously a recognition that the mandate of the architecture, for example, is not only piracy and robbery at sea. And we see, unfortunately, the way things are implemented presently in terms of the collaboration and the cooperation, it seems to focus solely on that, when we know that there are also cooperation and collaboration happening at the national levels around navies or other agencies collaborating to sort of stem the tide of illegal fishing, for example. And personally, I think that for us to be able to get this right, it therefore means that agencies that are not the Navy, for example, Fisheries Department, are also part of the discourse. And then it means, therefore, you need someone with fisheries expertise in that training and education department. Because again, I don't think that it is within the remit of any naval agency to actually understand the complexities around fisheries governance. And therefore, you need to ensure that collaboration is actively happening either in the training and education department and also beyond that. Personally, that is the only way I think, based on the research that I do. But of course, I also understand that it's going to be, to a point, complex unless we get one thing right. In reality, the issue around piracy and Piracy have not necessarily been gotten right. So trying to then immediately trying to use the same Navy to try to stop issues relating to illegal fishing would make things more complicated. So for example, I think at the introduction, you talked about the zones that are already operational. A couple of the zones, the one that is supposed to be situated in Praia, in Cabo Verde is still not operational. The one in Angola is still not operational. So I think we need to formalize the agreement. You know, what was agreed in Yaoundé, we need to keep going back to it and stop focusing only on piracy and Piracy. I read the document actually before today's event, just to understand, are things adequately accounted for? And interestingly, all this we're talking about now around training and research were stated, were agreed, but then in practice, there's only an aspect of it. So we need to go back to the drawing board. Yes, the region have made an improvement, and I mean, we have to recognize that we are not necessarily where we need to be, but then we're not where we used to be. And so to get things right, we need to go back to what was agreed. Thank you.
That is such a critical point. When I was at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, we had an event, and some of the people on the call were there for it, where we created a list of all the instruments and all the institutions on maritime security cooperation in Africa that had been brought up over the years. And so many of them had never been formally unwound. They were still there, but they were all sort of really on point. They were enlightened documents. They just had never been implemented, and over time people had forgotten what was in them. And so going back to them, going back to the text, going back to the mandates, I think is really important. And when it comes to where we are now, the Yaoundé architecture really needs to underscore the importance for all partners to look at that 2013 Code of Conduct, and for the broader context to look at the Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050. And to that, I want to turn to Ambassador Mustafa, who had mentioned sort of the thoughts and recommendations on coordination. And I want to ask to that, how can NATO as a partner and other partners that are on this call be better marshaled into supporting the aims of AIMS and the mandate of the Yaoundé architecture. I say that partly in the context of the really robust discussion that has been happening on the chat relating to both SWAIMS and which is support to the West African Integrated Maritime Strategy, and the YARIS platform, which is the Yaoundé Architecture Regional Information Sharing platform that has been discussed. And so in that vein, how can partners like NATO become part of the supporting mechanisms for implementing the objectives of AIMS 2050 and the Yaoundé Code? Ambassador Mustafa?
Thank you, Ian. I think that I would like to start by actually saying that it is our responsibility, and we must recognize it as national governments in the continent, that is our member states, that the primary responsibility for governance, I take a lot of, I see a lot of the points made by Bad about the industry and so on and so forth. So, I mean, we will be the first persons in the continent to say that the primary responsibility really rests in the African governments. Having said that, I also want to say, in relation to that, I also want to say that we always have very good regulations. We have many protocols, as you have mentioned. And I want to say that and the African Union will be the first to admit, one of our biggest problems ourselves is that a lot of these have issues with either signing, a lot of people will sign and then ratification and so on and so forth. But of course, now we are seeing that perhaps spending so much time to say that people should ratify is not as important, because some countries who have not even ratified some of the protocols, like you're talking about the Yaoundé, are actually implementing them. I give you an example. One of our biggest things in the African Union is free movement. There are many countries, especially in ECOWAS. In ECOWAS, if you like, is the superstar for free movement. We've been doing that for ages. But there are countries, if you like, who have not really officially ratified, but they are doing this. In terms of what partners can do, and that also goes to answer Konat's question about the relationship, what, as the Secretariat, as the African Union, what are we doing? And how are we positioning ourselves to not only coordinate the regional groupings, our member state, but also our relationship with partners. And one practical recommendation that I will make, and which is a low hanging, if you like, is a low hanging fruit, is in the EMS, we had wanted to put, for instance, dedicating a department, a maritime department in the African Union. And what would that do? That would give focus, real focus to the issue of maritime. And the African Union is a gigantic body. And we have the peace and security, we have policy organs like Peace and Security Council, we have all manners of things, but we wanted, unfortunately, right now it is not on the card. So one of the recommendations I really want to make for partners and for partners like NATO is to consider sponsoring experts to come. In addition, you know, we have with NATO, we have a liaison officer who is really who is no longer, I think he's been reposted. I think that in addition to the liaison officer, the NATO liaison officer, perhaps partners like NATO and EU should really consider sending experts that will help establish, not a department because it's not happening now and it has to do with this thing. I think that will help both the member countries and also the partners. Another thing that kind of focus would do is the outreach that Dr. F.S. Sinasi was talking about. The issue of outreach, for us, it is the blue economy is very important. There are many people who say we just came into it just recently. I mean, that can be, but outreach to different communities, to different industries, people like Bad who are in the shipping industry, people in the research, people in the oceanographies, the fisheries, and so on and so forth, and including the communities. The communities who, when they are properly engaged, will be the skilled personnel, the skilled maritime personnel that we're talking about. So I think that those are two practical things I would really recommend. And what would be the outcome for that kind of thing? Partners in the continent need to build trust and confidence. And when partners are seen, you are talking about illegal fishing, for instance. I mean, there's so many of our partners who have database. There are so many of our partners who have eyes on the sea, and they know which trawlers. Information sharing, somebody in the chat box talked about intelligence sharing. They're partners in those domains that can really help in sharing information, data, in trying to, for instance, backlist shipping trawlers that come and steal. A lot of our countries do not have some of these capacities and some of these capabilities, and we can share. That will definitely build confidence with our governments. And of course, partners also can put pressure. I work in government. I will be the first person to say that we are not where we are in terms of implementation and in terms of what was being spoken about offshore, that the whole law enforcement thing has to start. In fact, one of the problems we have in government is the debate whether or not these criminal enterprises have gone so far that even if you do any interventions, they are amenable to change. Whether these criminal enterprises have come and they are trying to survive against you as government. And then you find that some governments now say, well, so it is a security issue, it is a military issue, we have to do the law enforcement. While on the other side, there is also the community base, you know, providing the good governance, providing the social, providing the opportunity, the job creation for teaming youths, for instance, so that they are not recruited, or they are not taking part in kidnapping, piracy, and so on and so forth. So two key things. I think NATO, we are going to have our military-to-military conversation with NATO, which we do annually. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it this year. And in terms of what we can do in harmonization of legal, I don't know if we still have time. Our legal counsel is in the call. I don't know if she wants to, if you want to give her half a minute to just say a few things about the problem with member states, the issue of harmonization of law. Ambassador Namira, are you still on the call?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, very good. Sorry, Ian, but I think that...
Please, Ambassador Namira, it's good to see you. And
see you again.
Mustafa, thank you very much. I welcome Ambassador Namira's comments, because I think this point of harmonization of legal training and legal approaches is incredibly important. So, Madam Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you so much. Actually, thank you, Ambassador Hadisa, and thank you, Ian. When it comes to the issues in relation to the legal training, I would start with that. I do agree with one of the commentators that when we are training officials who are in practice, we end up putting them in our legal jargon lost. This is something we have to take care of and adapt our legal trainings to the military officials. The issue of Ambassador Hadisa that she raised in relation to our member states is true. We have one problem when it comes to the ratification of our documents. We have a lot of programs to try to accelerate the ratification. But again, it's the will of the member states. So it's not something it's in our hands really to do, but we are trying to at least encourage member states that they may not know what the benefits of having these documents. The issue of having a maritime department in the African Union, we fought so hard for it in the last restructuring of the Commission because we were actually copying the models of other organizations like the UN and others, because I'm the legal counsel, so it should be under me, and then everybody has their own piece of the cake depending on their own portfolios. But member states were inclined only to add a maritime officer in the with the blue economy. So which is I think it's very minor. We're still handling the strategy, and the strategy, as Ambassador Hadisa said, is already in implementation. But stemming out of this strategy, we have the Lomé Charter for Maritime Security, which is still pending the ratifications and the finalization of its annexes. One of the major issues that I have discovered in some trainings I have joined with in the maritime field is in relation to the capacity itself. And I think this is one of the problems we discover in the Gulf of Guinea. We have this case that was in ITLOS between Switzerland and Nigeria for oil traffickers. It shows that it was good to have a navy as big as Nigeria to be able to go in hot pursuit against this vessel. But how many of the countries around the Gulf of Guinea can manage this? we need also to have this kind of capacity on the ground in order to be able to support the not only the Gulf of Guinea member states, but also the Gulf of Guinea association itself, the organization itself, to be able to implement and carry out its mandate. These are my quick comments. I know you are running out of time, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I think to that point about the San Padre Pio case, the Switzerland versus Nigeria one, I think one of the important sort of takeaways from looking at all the ITLOS and other international tribunal jurisprudence on maritime oil-related issues, whether it's bunkering operations or ship-to-ship transfers, it's almost all of them occur in West and Central Africa. So if you look at San Padre Pio, the Dusgat Integrity, the Saiga, and the Virginia G, which are all sort of key cases for understanding the international law around them, they all involve questioned steps, whether they were ultimately found to be okay or not, in the Gulf of Guinea. And I think that's really important to recognize, that having an understanding of those laws before going out and doing interdiction operations is critical to making sure that they are ultimately successful, and that the deterrent effect of maritime law enforcement comes in, whether it's in the piracy context, the fishing context, or other criminal activities like illicit oil-related offenses. And I think I think you make some excellent points about how to incorporate sort of legal understandings and instruments into training. I want to turn now. This is one of the key questions that's been a discussion lately, and this goes to what Ambassador Hadiza just said as well about liaison officers and that sharing. The EU has launched the Coordinated Maritime Presence, a new form of engagement involving the presence of naval vessels in the region. And my question is to really both Captain Belbel and Captain Mohammed on what coordination you are looking for out of that. In other words, how can the momentum behind the Coordinated Maritime Presence mission, as well as some of these others like SWAMES and the incorporation of the Yaris platform, be leveraged to maximum effect? What is needed? What are the profiles needed for training? What are the personalities needed for liaison officers? How do we help facilitate cooperation between Europe, NATO, North America, other partners, and the region in the most effective way possible? So Captain Belbel, Captain Mohammed, it's a very broad question. It's actually a set of questions, really. I would object to myself if I were in court for asking a compound question. But please, I would love your thoughts. Captain Mohammed, to you first. All right, we'll try for Captain Belbel. Captain Belbel, are you still with us?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful.
I'm still with you. I think you, Jan, you are asking me a very sensitive question. So, because you know that the presence of foreign navies in our region doesn't depend on, let's say, ICC or the regional centers, but also depend on the approval of the coastal countries. I think piracy is an international crime. So I think beyond the international waters, it is clear that any ships or belonging to any country can address the issues. Yes, you know that the context, because somebody asked the question of if it is valuable to have an operation like Atalanta in the Gulf of Guinea. You know, the context here is not the same like what is going on off the Horn of Africa. I think I'm not talking on behalf of the coastal countries of the Gulf of Guinea, but I might suppose that those coastal countries will need to be supported instead of giving the responsibility of securing their waters to others. But I think they are well placed to answer that question. This being said, at the inter-regional level where I am now, I think our ultimate goal, as I said earlier, is to secure the Gulf of Guinea. So any person, any entities that has the same goal is welcome in our area. As I was saying that the contest with Somalia or the Horn of Africa is not the same, because here in the Gulf of Guinea, when the Maritime Security started, I think a few years ago, our head of state and government put in place a number of measures. Among them, we have the creation of what we call in these days, the YAMS, the Yaoundé Architecture for Maritime Security. I think you talk about that structure a few minutes ago. And we have structure, most of them are fully operational. Some of them are not fully operational. Some others are in development. I think the interim director, the acting director of CRESMAO announced a good news that the Zone G head of the MMCC has already been appointed, and I think if he is not in Praia, he will be in Praia in the forthcoming weeks or months. So we have to coordinate. I think the first step or the first level is sharing information. Sharing information is crucial, is instrumental, because now the Yaoundé architectural structure have not the privilege for the voluntary reporting from the ships at sea. This privilege is meant for MGATGOG and IMB, PRC. How do you want the coastal countries or the navies of the coastal country to act appropriately when there is an incident at sea? They are waiting for somebody else to send information that he has received from the ship. So, and when we are cooperating with what we call with our partners, they will not share operational information with us. They will say they will share strategic information. Strategic information will not help to what we call to intercept pirates at sea. So the first thing is information sharing. If we have access to information timely in our region, I think we will improve our readiness, we will improve our response. Now, you are talking of the cooperation at sea with foreign navies. So, what we call the regional navies with foreign navies. Yes, because you know that as the coastal countries have secured, let's say, the territorial waters, the anchorage zones, now pirates are going far from the coastline to attack the ships. And they know that we don't have capacities to go there to respond when there is an event, because I think if we have assets, we will spend, let's say, 10 hours to reach, let's say, 150 nautical miles. So I think, to summarize, we need them, but they have to come and talk with us, negotiate if it is appropriately with us, and to see how we can integrate them in our strategy. Not that somebody is somewhere planning for deployment in our region. Thank you. I think I was not too long.
No, and I think you make really important points about that need for true coordination, true cooperation. And I think you make a very important point as well, that in some ways, the complexity of the situation today in terms of where attacks are occurring, the brazenness of some of the attacks is in fact a result of the risk-reward calculus having changed, such that pirates can no longer expect to get away with it in the territorial sea. They have to attack farther out. They have to make it more difficult. And so they have actually increased or escalated their own approaches in response to the escalation and improvement of maritime law enforcement and security in the nearshore areas. So I think you make some really tremendous points there. Now, I am very conscious of time, and I want to give all of the speakers a final chance to offer very brief recommendations, bullet point recommendations. But I want to start off first with Captain Mohammed, because I know he did not have a chance to answer that last question. So Captain Mohammed, if you can be very brief in answering that, and then provide your recommendation, and then I will go to Kamal, and we'll mix up the order, but please, Captain Mohammed, very briefly.
Okay, thank you very much. The point of entry through our strategies from the perspective of ECOWAS and ICAS, rather than creating, is to complement what is on ground, and it is believed the support to these maritime centers within the framework short, medium, and long-term objectives that is achievable. And very also difficult when it comes to issue of sovereignty, unlike the perspective of piracy, which on clause Article 101, 100, and 105 has universal jurisdiction. At least we have tried in Nigeria and Benin. Operation Prosperity has shown a very good working relationship, and it is doable, which succeeded in reducing the piracy to the barest to minimum. So I still believe they can come in through the strategies and with the support of the member state. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think that's really important. Unfortunately, I am going to contradict my own statement as to who would be going next. Mr. Bud Dar has a hard stop, so I'm going to offer him a moment just to give his final recommendation. Bud, over to you.
Thank you, and I appreciate you changing up the order a little to accommodate my schedule. It's been a real pleasure being here today. Recommendations I would give are, first of all, be honest about the problem, because you can't really undertake true problem solving unless you've had a transparent, honest understanding of what it is. Second is, don't just treat the symptoms, treat the cause. And the third is, work together and work with external partners to do all of those things. And I again reaffirm my commitment as representative of the container liner industry that we certainly are prepared to do our part to help you understand what it is we're seeing and what sorts of things you might be able to do to help yourselves with this problem in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some very on-point recommendations. Kamal, I now turn to you. I know you wanted to make a comment about the CMP as well, so please do so briefly, and then offer up your recommendations.
Yes, in the CMP, very laudable comments and interventions that have been made by Captain Bell and then Mohammed. Obviously, these are people that have had long experience and commitment in the maritime security architecture of this region, CONAM and everybody else. I think in truth, one of the things we must admit is that whether we like it or not, we'll continue to have a North-South relationship, we'll continue to have dialogue of who we are and who you are, but we always notice that there are great areas of cooperation and where there are shared interests. One of the greatest things that the architecture was lacking is the issue of confidence building. Confidence building between our partners or between the industry and member countries. And the CMP, whether you like it or not, have deepened or cracked this confidence much, much further. I think that the CMP ought to have been an entry point, within the regional, within the Yaoundé architecture and taking into consideration the regional economic communities, but that has not been the case. As somebody mentioned, I have interacted with many people in this Yaoundé architecture in member countries. If you want the Yaoundé architecture to work well, 3 years, 4 years into the Yaoundé architecture, here in Accra, there in Benin, officers are sitting and monitoring Zone F and Zone E 24 hours. Why is it that the shipping industry is still not to even just check in and share information and say, hey, here am I, I'm passing. I'm part of the reason why you are doing this work. This silence of the Yaoundé architecture coordination, where nobody is talking to them until there is a Piracy incident and they will have to react. I just don't get it because it doesn't add up. Ships are checking in with that is far away, but never prepared to check in and just say hello. How do you feel if you are sitting at the NMC in Zone F or E and you get the captain to say that I am the captain of this ship and I'm just passing through the waters? So in reality, is this because there is lack of confidence in the system to start with? So why are we investing money, EU money, member states money, if ultimately we are not prepared to put in the final base of the blocks to make sure that there's confidence building? So this already existed, which was a major area, and the CMP has come in, without, using the existing architecture as an entry point, and this is something that is to be watched. So I would hope that the EU and the key member states of the CMP should look at it and know that this approach is self-defeating in a way. We have built the Yaoundé architecture and a lot has been put in by the EU and other countries up this stage. People should not feel frustrated about it. The truth is that we must be able to overcome this piracy threat. The truth is that Gulf of Guinea countries may not be doing enough, but the truth is that quite a lot has also been done over the period. Even in NATO, we have challenges. So we should recognize this and then put in the confidence building measures, and the CMP should be seen as temporary. Gaps already exist in the entry of the CMP, and those gaps will have to be addressed. And this will be my recommendation on that.
Thank you so much, Kamal. I'm going to just move rapidly through our speakers. Admiral Boniface Conan, your 10-second final recommendation.
Okay, yeah. I will just say that we need to be, there's a need for coherence. You cannot judge something you are not helping to build. A lot have been said already. We want the architecture of Yaoundé, the Yaoundé Code of Conduct to be working. We need to get inside, know what the mission of the centers are, help them build up, link up with AU initiative for maritime security around Africa, build all these links together, and then we can talk about cooperation. Because who are we cooperating with? In a hurry, there is a need for security. Okay, there is a need for ships and navies in the Gulf of Guinea. But how long do you think this is going to last? So I don't think this is a durable solution to be talking about joint presence in the Gulf of Guinea because it's become the most insecure part of a globe. Before, by doing so, you come in and help build up this architecture and know exactly where you are putting the money. That's the only word I can say for now.
Thank you so much. Ife, over to you, your final thoughts on today.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And thank you for the recommendations so far. It is absolutely apt, and I feel that it should be strongly considered. However, for my part, without really regurgitating what has been said already, I would basically say go back to the drawing board. The agreements highlighted, recognized that these things are needed. It even talked about exchange of views on maritime issues. It talked about sharing curriculum and course information. And so, I mean, to be able to fill the gaps, it means therefore that we have to then remember what was agreed and work with the architecture, you know, from the national to the regional level, so that we can ensure that things are done in line with what the different governments have agreed. And I think one of the problems, obviously, we've talked about the challenges around funding, the challenges around, you know, expertise. But at the end of the day, if governments or those that sign an agreement see that efforts are made at the national level to actually make sure that the interagency cooperation is working, perhaps it might be an incentive for them to do better. And so for us to ensure that the interagency cooperation and collaboration is working, we then need to extend that by providing necessary training, but also extending the training and sensitization programs or something, education program to the communities, because they have an active role to play, especially given that, well, the region lacks the resources. It means that they can get help from whoever. And I feel that the community should be central to improving and enhancing safety and security in the Gulf of Guinea. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love those points. Captain Belbel, your final recommendations?
Yes, Ian. Yes, thank you. I think I would be long because recommendations derive from what I've previously said. I think we need to sit down with our international partners. If I say we, I'm talking of the Yaoundé architecture structure, ICC, the regional centers, the MMCC, and so on, with our international partners. We need to build trust. And after that trust, we will have we will put in place an action plan that integrates the Yaoundé architecture missions and our international partners' missions. At the end of the day, I think we will achieve the ultimate goal, as I said, secure the Gulf of Guinea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ambassador Hadiza, your final thoughts. I think you are the alpha and the omega of our discussion. So you have the final word on the panel.
Thank you for the pressure. I mean, a lot have been said about building trust and confidence. And I think that this is very, very important, not only for our relationship or cooperation with our partners, which is very important. There is a lot of understanding, transparency that is required on that, and a lot of understanding, like my sister would say, understanding of what the problem is. But I also want to say now, turn the table. Well, now, Ian, you're going to put me in trouble. When I was working for the Nigerian government, I have only one government looking for me. Now I have 55 governments. But I must say this, that the trust and confidence must also be built amongst us. There's so much talked about, and there's so many experts from the Yaoundé architecture, from the regional, from ECOWAS, but we also need to enhance our own level of trust. Training, for instance, should be done at entry level, not only at the generals or at the policy level and strategic level, but down to the operational and tactical level, so that amongst us in the continent, we can also build a lot of trust. I mean, my brother Conan, I keep on going back to him, he spoke about language. You know, the convening power, one of the questions in the survey, it talks about the Anglophone, Francophone, the convening power of the African Union, the fact also that the African Union coordinates things, it's very important and it's supposed to integrate us. So I think that we also should try to build confidence. I've seen something in the HUB's publication, Gulf of Guinea Regional Dynamics, a publication for February 2020, and it made a very good conclusion for our partners. And that is that, you know, we should show understanding, and we should encourage maybe rich countries and regional centers, powers, those with the capability and the will to do this thing. Sometimes we should encourage them instead of only seeing the negative aspects of those kind of things. So understanding, trust, and confidence.
Madam Ambassador, thank you so much. I think those are fantastic points. I want to thank the entire panel. This has been a really tremendous discussion. But before I wrap up, I want to ask if the NATO Hub would like to make any final comments or share any final reflections. NATO Hub?
Thank you very much. On behalf of the director, everything, a lot of things was being shared. Thank you, Madam Ambassador from the African Union. And this represents all the African friends and brothers that are here. A lot of answers are still to be answered and lots of effort needs to be done. Lots of key takeaways for sure. And we talk about cooperation, coordination, and collaboration, these three C's, but amongst all these three C's is the communication that encompasses the language, the standardization, the way we build our narratives through the young people, the women, the ones that really are engaged in some sense with the maritime domain, either in industry, fishing, creating jobs like Madam Ambassador just reflect. And we know that this COVID brought a lot of concerns, reducing the budget for law enforcement, for defense budget, exacerbates the social part that will exacerbate also the crime that we need to be prepared to tackle, but brought a lot of good opportunities like this one to get the people together to speak about this. And we should be proud of ourselves to be here, frankly, building trust among each other to move forward. Like somebody said, we need to align the agenda and take advantage that this is the decade of the ocean to build the ocean culture. Taking advantage, again, I'm using advantage a lot of times to be positive of the existing framework, for example, between NATO and African Union, the so-called LNO that is missing, that the COVID just took it out from Addis for a matter of security. Information sharing, it's one of our pillars here in the hub and of course within NATO. Dr. Kamal talked about synchronization. We need to understand where to go to this piece of synchronization that for sure the hub mission as it is, and you can see it in our webpage, is to try to avoid duplications within the allies, within partners, and of course try to fill the gaps that we have in our mission as a NATO body. Sorry. On the leadership role, there is lots to be done, and building platforms with the hub, inviting NATO and to discuss at all levels, and for sure the political level is not my level, to assume this, but I'm sure that somebody is concerned with this. So NATO have a lot of knowledge, not maritime, and not going just on maritime. We can have knowledge on cybersecurity. We have knowledge on civil military engagement. We have knowledge in so many transverse topics that we may support under, of course, the specification of who needs these capabilities, and at the staff level, this can be done. Of course, formalization needs to be done at the respective level. And of course, I give you an example that even NATO, and I'm Portuguese, so I'm quite proud to speak about this, because the Portuguese Navy just provide to NATO something that we encompasses in our missions, not the maritime mission, but also crisis management and risk management on oceanographic, meteorologic, and hydrographic center of excellence. That this is not just for maritime, can support others to go move to plan missions, to plan catastrophes. All this is just an example what even NATO, we are improving and creating these kind of things. Don't let me, because I'm Portuguese, I'm referring to a Portuguese COE for my other colleagues from NATO allied countries that are also assisting this, but this is just opportunities that can raise if we are open to them. So now that you know the hub, so you can visit our websites, you can share with us. We will keep our LinkedIn platform open for bringing ideas, because we know that a lot of questions are to be answered, and at the proper level, proper timing, we will address to them. Let me also take this opportunity from our side to thank the people that were behind the scenes, either in TSI and here in the hub, to thank their work and time to provide us this platform that for us was really a learning opportunity. Thank you very much from our side.
Thank you so much to the Hub. This has been, I think, a fantastic example of the Hub's main purpose, which is to connect and sort of shepherd that process of coordination, collaboration, and ultimately communication. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have been your moderator today. It was a great discussion. I think we had more questions than we could have ever answered in the time allotted, which indicates that the discussion needs to continue. And we need to really look at how to move from conversation to action and really implement what is being said. In my final thoughts, I'm taking away a couple of things. Number one is that if you want to work with the region, you need to work through the region. And there are institutions and mechanisms that are in place that can be leveraged in order to build the training, education, and exercising needs that will benefit everyone. The second is that there is a growing concern about closing the maritime land divide, that littoral space of where, okay, yes, a pirate may attack 300 miles out, but ultimately they're going to bring them, the seafarers, back to shore. And so how do we make sure that there isn't a blind spot between the land and the sea that we are missing, and that we are really recognizing the fact that most maritime security problems are symptoms of problems on land, that though 90% of world trade happens by sea and 70% of the earth is covered in water, 100% of people live on land, and we need to think about how to address those issues as well. And that goes to the human side of all of this, which is the key takeaway, I would say, that transcends every bit of the discussion, which is that people are critical at every level. People are who are being attacked at sea, and it is people who can respond to them. And in order to create the community of professionals that can be effective in exercising the capacity, showing the capability, using the authority and jurisdiction, working through the legal framework, and really continuing to build the will to resolve these problems, we have to know each other. We have to trust each other. And that starts with honesty, that starts with relationships, and that we need to build. So to that, I thank the Hub for helping build those relationships. I thank Three Stones International for the opportunity to bring this fantastic group together. And I encourage all of you to not only find everyone that spoke today on LinkedIn and be a continued part of the conversation, but to be part of these discussions in the future, as there will be more webinars between the Hub and Three Stones International. So there's much more to come. So let's continue, and together we can accomplish this. So thank you all very much. I look forward to our next interaction. Have a wonderful day. And for those who are observing, a very happy Ash Wednesday to those celebrating. And for those who are not, enjoy the day nonetheless. We are working to build this community. And I thank you for having been a great part of it today.